What happens when a beloved Hollywood icon, known for his charm and composure, suddenly finds himself pushed into a corner on live television and decides not to smile his way out of it? Before we dive into this explosive moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button for stage view, drop a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do if you were in his seat. Because what unfolded that day wasn't just an interview, it was a collision. The studio lights burned brighter than usual that morning. The air inside the set felt charged, almost electric, like something unseen was waiting to snap. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their whispers echoing faintly across the polished floor. Cameras glided silently into position. Producers exchanged quick glances. Something about the energy felt different. And then he walked in. Hugh Jackman entered with that signature smile, the one audiences around the world had come to trust. Warm, effortless, disarming. He waved, shook hands, greeted the hosts with practiced ease. But there was something subtle beneath it all. A tension barely visible. The kind only those paying close attention could catch. He took his seat. Across from him sat Joy Behar, already leaning slightly forward, her expression sharp, observant. The kind of look that didn't just listen, it probed. The introductions rolled smoothly. Applause. Light laughter. A few jokes about his latest project. Hugh played along, relaxed at first, his voice calm, his demeanor polished. He spoke about his work, his passion, the discipline behind the roles people admired him for. But then the shift. Joy tilted her head slightly, her tone changing, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for Hugh to notice. "So Hugh," she began, her voice laced with a casual sharpness, "you've built this reputation as the nice guy of Hollywood. Always smiling, always gracious. But isn't that a little convenient?" The audience reacted with a soft murmur. Hugh blinked once. Just once. His smile didn't disappear, but it tightened. "Convenient," he repeated, his voice still steady. "Yes," she pressed, leaning back now, crossing her arms. "Because people don't always stay that perfect. Sooner or later, the real person comes out. Don't you think?" A pause. It was small, but it stretched. Hugh let out a quiet breath, nodding slowly. "I think people are complicated," he said carefully. "And I don't claim to be perfect." There was a flicker in his eyes now. Not anger. Not yet. But something had shifted. Joy didn't let it go. "But you've avoided controversy almost entirely," she continued. "In an industry where that's nearly impossible. Some might say that's curated. Controlled. Maybe even a little inauthentic." A sharper murmur rippled through the audience. The camera cut closer. Hugh's fingers interlocked in his lap. His posture straightened ever so slightly. "Inauthentic," he repeated, this time slower. Joy smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was pointed. "Well, let's be honest. No one is that universally liked without managing their image very carefully." For a split second, silence swallowed the room. And then something changed. Hugh leaned forward. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. But deliberately. "You know," he began, his voice lower now, more grounded. "It's interesting. People often assume kindness is a strategy." The audience quieted completely. "But for some of us," he continued, his gaze steady, "it's just who we choose to be." There it was. The first spark. Joy's expression didn't soften. If anything, it sharpened further. "But is it a choice?" she countered quickly. "Or is it a performance? Because you're an actor, after all." A few audience members gasped softly. Hugh's jaw tightened just slightly. His eyes didn't leave hers. "Everything can look like a performance," he said. "Especially when people expect you to fail." The tension thickened. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. One of them attempted a small laugh, trying to lighten the mood, but it fell flat. Joy leaned in again, sensing the shift, pressing harder. "I'm just saying," she said, her tone now unmistakably confrontational. "Sometimes the nicest image hides the most. That's all." And there it was. The line. Crossed. Hugh's smile faded, not completely, but enough that it no longer softened his face. His expression settled into something more serious. More real. "Are you asking me a question?" he said slowly, "or making an accusation?" The audience reacted instantly, gasps, whispers, a wave of tension rolling through the room. Joy raised her eyebrows, clearly not expecting that level of directness. "I'm asking," she replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. Hugh nodded once. Then again, as if weighing something internally. "Well," he said, sitting back now, his voice calm but firm, "if you're asking whether I've worked hard to maintain a certain standard of how I treat people, then yes. Absolutely. A beat. But if you're suggesting that kindness is some kind of mask, he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly, then I think that says more about how we view people than about who they really are. The audience erupted into scattered applause, uncertain at first, then growing louder. Joy didn't clap. She watched him closely. The atmosphere had shifted entirely now. What started as a routine interview had transformed into something else. Something unpredictable. And Hugh knew it. You could see it in the way he held himself now. The ease was gone, replaced by clarity. Focus. Joy exhaled, leaning back again, but there was a flicker of tension in her posture now too. Well, she said, forcing a small smile, this is getting interesting. Hugh didn't smile back. I think honesty usually is, he replied. Another ripple through the audience. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression, every shift in tone. Producers off camera were already signaling, trying to recalibrate the segment. But it was too late. The moment had taken on a life of its own. Joy tapped her fingers lightly against the table, considering her next move. You know, she said after a brief pause, people at home might be wondering why you're getting defensive. And just like that, another spark. Hugh let out a quiet breath, almost a soft laugh, but there was no humor in it. I'm not defensive, he said. I'm responding. A pause. To what feels like a very specific narrative. The audience leaned in. What narrative? Joy shot back. Hugh tilted his head slightly. That kindness isn't real unless it's proven otherwise, he said. That being respectful somehow makes you suspicious. He held her gaze. I don't buy that. Silence. Heavy, thick, undeniable. Even the audience didn't react this time. They just watched. Because now, it wasn't just a conversation. It was a standoff. Joy opened her mouth to respond. But for the first time, there was a flicker of hesitation. And Hugh saw it. Something inside him settled. Not anger. Not frustration. Resolve. You invited me here to talk, he continued, his voice steady, measured. And I'm happy to do that. But I'm not here to defend being decent. That line landed. Hard. A wave of applause broke out. Louder this time, more unified. Joy glanced briefly toward the audience, then back at Hugh, her expression tightening just slightly. The balance of the conversation had shifted. And everyone in the room felt it. But this was only the beginning. Because what happened next would push this moment from uncomfortable to unforgettable. The applause didn't just echo. It lingered, vibrating through the room like the aftershock of something bigger than anyone had planned for. For a brief moment, the energy tilted in Hugh's favor. You could feel it in the audience, the subtle shift, the quiet alignment. Some leaned forward in their seats, others exchanged glances, as if silently asking the same question. Did that really just happen? At the table, though, things were far from settled. Joy Behar didn't retreat. If anything, she recalibrated. Her fingers, which had been tapping lightly moments before, now stilled completely. Her posture straightened. Her expression softened, but not in surrender. It was the kind of softness that masked something sharper underneath. A reset. Well, she said slowly, her tone measured. No one's asking you to defend being decent. A small pause. But when you position yourself as above the mess, people are going to wonder what you're avoiding. A low murmur spread through the audience again. Not as explosive this time, more uncertain. Divided. Hugh didn't respond immediately. And that silence, it stretched. His eyes dropped for a fraction of a second, then returned to Joy. Not with irritation, but with something deeper. Thoughtful. Calculated. As if he was choosing not just his words, but the weight behind them. I don't think I've ever said I'm above anything, he replied quietly. His tone had changed. It wasn't defensive anymore. It was grounded. Almost reflective. I've made mistakes, he continued. Plenty of them. I've had moments I'm not proud of. But I don't see the value in broadcasting every flaw just to prove I'm human. The room stilled again. One of the co-hosts shifted slightly, glancing between them, clearly debating whether to step in. But something about the tension held her back. This wasn't a moment you interrupted. This was a moment you watched. Joy tilted her head again, her eyes narrowing just slightly. But isn't that part of the problem? She pressed. This idea that image matters more than transparency? Hugh's lips pressed together for a brief second. Or maybe, he countered, it's about choosing what you give your energy to. That landed differently. Less like a comeback. More like a statement. Joy leaned forward again, sensing that shift, pushing into it. But you're in the public eye, she said. People look up to you. Don't they deserve to see the full picture? There was something in her tone now, not just confrontation, but insistence. Like she wasn't just challenging him anymore, she was trying to corner him. And Hugh felt it. You could see it in the way his shoulders squared slightly. The way his fingers tightened, just briefly, before relaxing again. They deserve honesty, he said. A beat. But honesty doesn't mean exposure. It doesn't mean turning your life into something consumable just to satisfy curiosity. A few claps broke out, hesitant at first, then fading as quickly as they began. Joy didn't even glance at the audience this time. Her focus was locked. But that's exactly what this industry is, she replied sharply. It's built on what people consume. And you've benefited from that. The words hung there. Heavy. Accusatory. And for the first time, something flickered across Hugh's face that hadn't been there before. Not anger. Not irritation. But something closer to disappointment. You're right, he said slowly. I have benefited from it. The admission caught some people off guard. You could hear it, the slight shift in the audience, the subtle intake of breath. Joy blinked just once, as if recalibrating again. But benefiting from something, Hugh continued, doesn't mean you lose the right to set boundaries within it. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It cut through the room anyway. A co-host finally leaned in slightly, attempting to ease the tension with a careful smile. I think what Joy is trying to get at. But Joy lifted her hand just slightly. Not rudely, but firmly. I can speak for myself, she said. And just like that, the temperature in the room ticked up again. Hugh leaned back in his chair now, his posture more open, but his eyes sharper than before. Of course, he said calmly. Joy's gaze didn't waver. So let me ask you directly, she said. Have you ever hidden something from the public to protect your image? The question landed like a crack of thunder. Audible gasps rippled through the audience. One of the producers off camera made a quick motion. Too quick, like they were debating whether to cut to break. But the cameras stayed locked. Hugh didn't answer right away. This time, the silence wasn't just tension. It was weight. Real weight. His jaw shifted slightly, his gaze drifting for just a moment. Not away, but inward. Like he was measuring something deeper now. Not just the question, but the intent behind it. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. Yes. The room froze. Joy's eyebrows lifted, just slightly. You have? She asked, almost surprised. Hugh nodded once. Of course I have, he said. Everyone has. Anyone who says they haven't is lying. The honesty hit harder than anyone expected. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't polished. It was real. But Joy didn't soften. So what was it? She asked quickly. There it was again. The push. The insistence. The line being tested again. This time, though, something shifted more visibly in Hugh. He exhaled slowly, leaning forward once more. But this movement carried a different energy than before. Not just deliberate. Decisive. No, he said. The word was calm, but absolute. Joy blinked. No, he repeated. I'm not going to turn my personal life into a spectacle just because we're sitting at this table. The audience reacted instantly, some clapping, others murmuring, a few shifting uncomfortably. Joy's expression tightened. But you just admitted. I admitted I'm human, Hugh cut in, not raising his voice, but not backing down either. Another ripple. This one sharper. Joy leaned in, her tone now unmistakably edged. Or are you just controlling the narrative again? And that was the moment. You could feel it before it even happened. The shift. The line snapping tight. Hugh's eyes locked onto hers, and this time, there was no trace of the earlier softness. Let me ask you something, he said, his voice steady, but carrying a new weight. The room held its breath. When does curiosity become entitlement? Silence. Pure, unbroken silence. Joy didn't answer immediately. For the first time since the conversation began, she hesitated, not in posture, not in expression, but in timing. And in live television, timing is everything. Hugh didn't fill the silence. He let it sit. Let it grow. Let everyone in that room, and everyone watching at home, feel exactly what he was asking. Finally, Joy leaned back, crossing her arms again, her lips pressing into a thin line. That's not what this is, she said. But her voice didn't carry the same certainty as before. Hugh tilted his head slightly. Isn't it, he replied. A beat. Because it feels like we've moved from conversation into interrogation. A collective reaction swept through the audience. Gasps, whispers, even a few audible wow-s. The co-hosts were visibly tense now. One of them shifted her papers unnecessarily. Another glanced toward the cameras, then back at Joy, then at Hugh. This wasn't controlled anymore. This wasn't planned. This was real. Joy let out a small breath, her composure still intact, but strained at the edges. "Well," she said, forcing a lightness that didn't quite land, "you came to a talk show." Hugh nodded once. "And I'm talking," he said. That line, simple as it was, cut deeper than anything before it. The audience erupted again, this time louder, more unified, more certain. Joy didn't interrupt the applause. She waited, but as the sound faded, her eyes didn't leave him. And in that gaze, there was something new now. Not just challenge, not just resistance, but something closer to realization. Because the dynamic had changed. Not just slightly, completely, and everyone could feel it. But what no one expected was how far this was about to go. The applause faded, but the tension didn't. It lingered, thick, unspoken, stretching across the table like a wire pulled too tight. No one dared to snap it. Not yet. For the first time since the segment began, the studio felt smaller. The lights hotter. The silence heavier. Hugh Jackman sat still, composed, but no longer relaxed. His presence had shifted from guest to something else entirely. Not confrontational, but immovable. Across from him, Joy Behar studied him with a different kind of focus now. The earlier sharpness was still there, but layered beneath it was something more deliberate. Calculating. As if she had realized that pushing harder wouldn't break him. So now she had to outmaneuver him. She leaned forward again, slower this time. "Let's take a step back," she said, her tone smoother, more controlled. "Because I think what people are seeing right now is someone who's very careful." A ripple moved through the audience. Not quite agreement, not quite resistance. Just awareness. Hugh didn't react immediately. Careful. It wasn't an insult on the surface. But it wasn't neutral either. "I am careful," he said after a moment. A few heads in the audience tilted. That wasn't the denial they expected. Joy's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing an opening. "So you admit it," she said. "You choose what people see." Hugh nodded once. "Yes," he said simply. The room shifted again. Not with tension this time, but with curiosity. "Because words matter," he continued, his voice calm but firm. "What you say, how you say it, it affects people. It shapes perception." He paused, letting that settle. And I take that seriously. There was something different in the way he said it. Not defensive. Not reactive. Intentional. Joy tapped her fingers lightly against the table again, but the rhythm had changed. Slower. More measured. "But doesn't that also mean you're shaping a version of yourself?" she pressed. "One that people are meant to believe." Hugh leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "Everyone does that," he said. "You. Me. Everyone watching. The only difference is my version is public." That line hit. Harder than expected. A murmur rolled through the audience, quieter this time, but deeper. More reflective. Joy opened her mouth, then paused. It was brief, but noticeable. Because for the first time, he wasn't just answering her questions. He was reframing them. She shifted in her seat. "But you're avoiding something," she said, her tone tightening just slightly. "There's a reason people don't trust perfection." Hugh's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened again. "I've never asked anyone to see me as perfect," he said. A beat. "But I won't pretend to be broken just to make people comfortable either." The audience reacted instantly, gasps, scattered applause, a few people leaning forward as if they'd just witnessed something important. Joy's lips pressed together. That one landed. And she knew it. The co-host to her left finally tried to step in again, her voice gentle but firm. "I think there's a bigger conversation here about." But Joy didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her. Her attention was locked on Hugh. "Or maybe," Joy said, her voice lower now, more pointed, "people just don't believe that what they're seeing is real." And there it was again. The same question. Repackaged. Reframed. But still the same challenge. Hugh exhaled slowly, his fingers brushing lightly against the table before settling again. "You keep coming back to that," he said. Joy didn't deny it. "Because it matters," she replied. Hugh nodded once. "Does it?" he asked. The question hung there, not dismissive but probing. Joy blinked. "What do you mean, does it matter?" she said. Hugh leaned forward slightly, not aggressively but with focus. "I mean, why does it matter if someone is kind without proving their flaws publicly?" he said. "Why is authenticity measured by how much you reveal, instead of how you treat people?" Silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty, but full. The audience didn't react right away. They absorbed it. Joy's expression shifted, just slightly. Not softer, but less certain. Because people want truth, she said. Hugh nodded again. So do I, he replied. A beat. But truth isn't always loud. It isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just consistency. That word lingered. Consistency. Not exciting. Not explosive. But undeniable. Joy leaned back, crossing her arms again. But this time, the movement felt different. Less assertive. More defensive. You're very good at this, she said, her tone carrying a faint edge of something new. Turning things around. Hugh gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. No, he said quietly. I'm just answering honestly. Another pause. And then, Joy shifted again. But this time, the energy changed completely. She leaned forward once more, her eyes narrowing. Not with curiosity, not with analysis, but with something closer to frustration. All right, she said, her voice sharper now. Let's stop circling. The audience stirred. They could feel it. The build. The breaking point. You say you're honest, Joy continued. You say you're real. But every answer you give is controlled, polished, safe. Her words came faster now. Stronger. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe people don't connect with you the way they think they do, because they're not actually seeing you. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. That wasn't subtle anymore. That was direct. He didn't move right away. But when he did, it was different. He leaned forward, further than before. His hands resting flat against the table now. His posture no longer relaxed. Grounded. Firm. Present. And what exactly would you like to see? He asked. His voice was calm. But beneath it, steel. Joy didn't hesitate. Something real, she said. The words landed like a challenge thrown across the table. And for a moment, it felt like time slowed. Because something shifted in Hugh then. Not visibly, not dramatically, but internally. You could see it in his eyes. The calculation. The decision. The line he had been holding. And whether or not he was about to step past it. The audience leaned in. The co-hosts went completely still. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Hugh's jaw tightened just slightly before relaxing again. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been all segment. But heavier. You want something real, he said. Joy held his gaze. Yes. A long pause. And then, all right. The word dropped like a stone in still water. Ripples everywhere. Hugh straightened slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. You've been questioning my authenticity this entire time, he said. Suggesting that kindness is a performance. That composure is a mask. Joy didn't interrupt. Didn't move. So let me be real with you, he continued. A beat. I think there's a difference between asking hard questions and pushing a narrative. The audience reacted instantly, gasps, whispers, a few stunned expressions turning toward each other. Joy's face tightened. That's not what I'm doing, she said quickly. Hugh didn't raise his voice. But he didn't soften either. It feels like it is, he replied. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. You're not asking who I am, he continued. You're telling me who you think I am, and asking me to defend it. The words landed clean. Precise. Joy's lips parted, but no words came out immediately. Because for the first time, she didn't have a quick response. Hugh leaned back slightly now, but his presence didn't retreat. It expanded. Filled the space. And that's not a conversation, he said quietly. That's a setup. The audience erupted. Not just applause this time, reaction. Shock. Energy bursting through the room all at once. One of the co-hosts raised her hand slightly, half laughing, half stunned. Okay. But even she couldn't finish. Because the moment had already tipped. This wasn't just tense anymore. This was explosive. Joy looked out briefly at the audience, just for a second, before turning back to Hugh. And when she did, there was no softness left. Only resolve. Then let me be very clear, she said, her voice steady but sharp. Another pause. Another breath held across the entire room. This is live television. The statement hung there, loaded, deliberate. And people deserve honesty, she added. Hugh nodded once. They do, he said. A beat. And they're getting it. The silence that followed was louder than anything that had come before. Because now, there was nowhere left to go, except further. And what came next wouldn't just stay in that room. The silence didn't just linger, it pressed in. It wrapped around the table, the audience, the cameras tightening with every second that passed. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the usual hum of the studio, the shifting, the whispers, the quiet coughs, had vanished. Because everyone knew. This wasn't just another tense segment anymore. This was the moment that would define it. Hugh Jackman sat still, his gaze steady, his posture grounded. There was no performance left to read, no charm to soften the edges. Just presence. Unfiltered. Unmoved. Across from him, Joy Behar held her position, but something had changed. The earlier certainty, the sharp rhythm of her questioning, it had slowed. Not disappeared, but recalibrated under pressure. She inhaled, slow and controlled. "Then let's not pretend," she said, her voice cutting clean through the silence. "This isn't just about kindness or authenticity anymore. This is about perception. And right now, what people are seeing." She paused. Not for effect, but because even she could feel the weight of what she was about to say. Is resistance. A ripple moved through the audience. Not loud, not explosive, but undeniable. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes dropped for just a moment, just long enough for it to feel human. Real. Then they lifted again, meeting hers with something that wasn't defiance, but clarity. Or maybe, he said quietly, what they're seeing is someone choosing not to be pushed into something that doesn't feel right. The words didn't explode. They settled, and somehow that made them hit even harder. A few claps broke out, hesitant, scattered, but they grew slowly, like a wave deciding whether to rise. Joy didn't acknowledge them. She leaned forward again, but this time, the edge was different. Less aggressive. More exposed. "You're a public figure," she said. "You don't get to control how people interpret you." Hugh nodded once. "I don't," he agreed. "A beat. But I do get to control how I respond." That line landed with a quiet finality. The kind that doesn't invite argument. The kind that ends something. And for a moment, it felt like it had. Joy leaned back, her arms crossing again, but not as tightly as before. Her gaze shifted, just briefly, toward the audience, then back to him. The fire wasn't gone, but it had changed shape. "Well," she said, exhaling softly, "you've certainly made your position clear." There was something almost reflective in her tone now. Not quite concession, but no longer pure challenge. Hugh gave a small nod. "I've tried to," he said. And just like that, the tension broke. Not dramatically. Not with a laugh or a joke or a commercial break. But with a shift. The kind you feel more than see. One of the co-hosts finally leaned in, her voice lighter, carefully threading through the remains of the moment. "I think what's interesting here is how differently people define authenticity." Her words floated into the space, softer, safer. The conversation pivoted, gently, cautiously, into something more neutral. But the room hadn't forgotten. The audience hadn't forgotten. And neither had the cameras. Because even as the segment moved on, something lingered in the air. Something unresolved. Something recorded. Hours later, the clip was everywhere. It started small, a few uploads, a handful of shares. But within minutes, it spread. Faster than anyone expected. Faster than anyone could control. Screens lit up across the world. Phones buzzed. Notifications stacked. And suddenly, everyone had an opinion. "This is the realest I've ever seen him." She pushed too far. "No," he avoided the question. "That wasn't an interview, that was a standoff." The moment replayed again and again. Slowed down. Zoomed in. Analyzed frame by frame. Every pause dissected. Every word weighed. Every glance interpreted. On social media, the divide grew sharper by the hour. Some praised Hugh Jackman, calling him composed, respectful, grounded under pressure. A man who refused to be baited. A man who stood his ground without raising his voice. Others sided with Joy Behar, arguing that she asked the questions no one else would. That she challenged the polished image. That she pushed for something deeper, and didn't back down. Clips of his line, "I'm not here to defend being decent," echoed across timelines, turned into captions, headlines, debates. Another, "When does curiosity become entitlement?" became something bigger. A question people weren't just asking about him anymore, but about everything. Talk shows picked it up. Commentators weighed in. Panel discussions broke it apart, piece by piece. Was it a clash of personalities? A generational divide? A reflection of how audiences consume authenticity in the modern world? Or was it something simpler? A moment where two people, both experienced, both confident, refused to bend at the same time. Back at the studio, producers replayed the segment in quiet rooms, analyzing what went wrong or what went right. Because despite the tension, The numbers didn't lie. Viewership spiked. Engagement surged. The moment had landed, but not in a way anyone had planned. Days later, the conversation hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened. Clips turned into think pieces. Think pieces turned into debates. And the question at the center of it all remained unanswered. What do we actually expect from the people we watch? Perfection? Transparency? Or something in between? Hugh Jackman didn't immediately respond publicly. No statements. No clarifications. Just silence. And somehow, that silence spoke just as loudly as anything he had said on that stage. Joy Behar, on the other hand, addressed it briefly in a later segment, acknowledging the intensity, standing by her approach, but with a tone that hinted at something more reflective beneath it. Not regret, but awareness. Because even she knew, that moment had gone beyond a simple interview. It had become something people felt. And maybe that's why it stayed. Because it wasn't clean. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't resolved. It was messy, human, uncomfortable, real, and in a world where everything is polished, filtered, and carefully controlled. That kind of moment doesn't just disappear. It echoes. So now we turn it to you. What did you see in that moment? Was Hugh Jackman right to stand his ground? Or did Joy Behar simply ask the questions others were too careful to voice? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your take. And if you're drawn to moments like this, the ones that blur the line between performance and reality, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit that like button, and stay tuned. Because sometimes, the most unforgettable stories are the ones no one planned to tell.